The French Revolution. When we talk about the French Revolution, first we remember the words like liberty, equality and fraternity. Nowadays in every country, every people are asking for having equality, no discrimination, fraternity. So every country is trying to provide to its people the feeling of equality. They assure the freedom is provided to all people, irrespective of their caste, color, creed. So now, when we look into these words of liberty, equality and fraternity, even these three words have a history. The claiming of these words from history gets establishment from the French Revolution. So, the French Revolution, which happened in 1789, inspired many other countries in the coming years to fight for their freedom struggle. So, in this unit, we shall discuss what is the momentum that gave rise for the people to fight against their traditional monarchy. How did people fight? What are the consequences of this? And later, what happened? And what is the true story of the French Revolution? So, let us begin with an introductory note. The French Revolution, it was on the day of 14th July 1789. The entire state was on alarm. Everybody was terrified. What happened actually on 14th of July 1789? The 14th of July plays a very vital role, not only on the past, but even today. This is observed as a national day in France. So what happened actually on 14th of July? There were rumors which spread that the king has ordered the military to enter into the streets and destroy the people's gathering. And they were also expecting that the king might even order to open fire on the people. On the background, the people actually gathered on that day their protest towards the rise of the price of the bread. The rise of the price of the bread was actually troubling them a lot. Many of them are struggling to get even a piece of bread. That was the situation what the actual people are facing. Ignoring these situations, there were rumors which spread that the king has ordered the army to enter into the streets and then destroy the gathering. If necessary, the king may also order to open fire on these people. So, the news spread like a wildfire. As this news or this rumor spread like a wildfire, people were angered with the words of the king. Being ignorant to the problems of the people and also forcing the people to terrify the people, he ordered the army to destroy them, which means literal words that he do not want to pay any attention towards the problems of the people. This made the people very, very angry. As the people are very, very angry, they all gathered. Nearly 7,000 men and women gathered at a town hall. After gathering at a town hall, the 7,000 men and women, these people have formed their own group of force, popularly known as People's Militia. The People's Militia, having 7,000 force of people, which is comprising of men and women, went to the palace. The palace name is Bastille Palace. The Bastille Palace has been a symbol of royal power, and where those who are talking towards the favor of the people or those who did any agitations against the king are being imprisoned there. there are nearly 7 people imprisoned in this Bastille Palace. People on a mob went there and then they destroyed the palace, they killed the commander, and finally they released all the 7 prisoners who were imprisoned there, and later they destroyed the palace and broke the palace walls into small fragments. People are so much angry that people started to maintain as a symbol of their freedom that a fragment of a stone piece of the Bastille Palace in everyone's house. And people are so crazy, sometimes they even bought the stone fragments in the market. So on the day of 14th July, the people's militia attacked the Bastille Palace and destroyed the Bastille Palace, released the 7 prisoners who are imprisoned inside, and later breaking it into small fragments, sold the small fragments in the market, which made the people to feel very happy at that point of time. So this was a very rare incident which happened ever since in France became a monarchic state. So now the historians started to look at this point from a different perspective. What triggered the people's anger on that day to that much extreme level? What made the people to be so violent? So now, for us to understand this, we need to go in detail what happened on that day. Historians saw this as an outcome of a series of events. So what are the series of events that led for the people to come and blast a palace and break it into pieces? After breaking it, they could not get satisfied. They sold it in the market and people bought it. So we need to understand here, there is something which is very strong feeling for the people, which made the people to feel very bad. That's why that has raised the anger of the people. So let us find out in detail what are the series of the events that happened and resulted on the issue on the day of 14 July 1789 as people have blasted the Bastille Palace. Now, as the historians mentioned that we have a series of events which triggered for this incident. So now let us find out what are the series of the incidents. Let's focus on the French society in the late 18th century. How is the French society? How is it divided? Who is actually ruling the France? Let us find out the details now. France was ruled by Louis XVI. He belongs to Bourbon family and he ascended the throne in 1774. Louis XVI, belonging to a royal family, got ascended to the throne in 1774 and he got married to Austrian Princess Mary Antoinette. So Louis XVI, who came into power, the young king, he was just 20 when he ascended the throne. So after he got married and he ascended the throne, he went to find out what is the status of the treasury. When he opened and found out the facts that the entire treasury was empty, this brought a severe shock for a newly wedded married king. So Louis XVI found a shocking point, that is the treasury was empty. Why the treasury was empty? Later he started to find out the reasons why is the treasury empty. So in his process of understanding why the treasury was empty, he came to know that France has supported the American colonies to fight against the British. So when France has been supporting these 13 colonies to fight against the Britishers. Lot of money has been spent and lot of manpower has been sent there. So this long years of war has drained the economy of France. Finally, it resulted in a continuous credit from the outsiders at a very high rate of interest. So it has crossed $1 billion livres, and now the total loan amount has gone up to 2 billion livres. The 2 billion livres is really a very huge amount, and the creditors, the people those who gave money for the government, started to charge more percent of interest on behalf of the increase of the credit. As the credit has increased, the percentage of the interest also has increased. Now it has been raised to 10%. Now the France economy is completely in trouble. Continuous wars like supporting the American colonies to fight against the Britishers for 7 years, 7 long years, has completely drained the entire wealth of France. And now these creditors who gave the loan amounts are charging very high rate of interest. So finally France has to pay huge amount from its financial transactions in order to pay the interest for these people, and also to run the royal court, to run the government offices, to run the schools, the colleges, the universities, hospitals. All these are still becoming an overburden for the French government at that time. So now there is no other alternative left out other than just to increase the tax on putting the burden on the people directly. So this is a situation in 1774. Let's find out now. Louis, who got married newly to Austrian princess Mary at very young age, and he found that the treasury was completely empty. So in his process of learning what made the treasury to be empty, he learned that 7 continuous years of wars supporting the US colonies to fight against their colonial masters, the continuous and permanent enemy of the France, that is Great Britain, that resulted in huge loan amount for them, and finally it accounted to a total credit amount of 2 billion livres. So this 2 billion livres, the creditors who gave this loan amount started to charge 10% of interest, which is a very high rate of interest at that point of time. So now there is no other alternative other than increasing the taxes and putting the burden on the people in order to maintain the royal court, the government offices, the schools, the hospitals, the universities and everything. So let's find out what happened next. As there is no other alternative left out, they need to increase the taxes because they have tried all the alternative methods, but any of the measures could not suffice the economic crisis in France. So in order to maintain this, they need to increase the taxes on the people. So let us first throw light on how is French society divided. French society is divided into 3 estates. The first comprises of clergy, the first group. The second, the nobility. And the third, it consists of merchants, court officials, lawyers, peasants, artisans, small peasants, and also all the landless laborers. So the entire society has been brought into the bracket of 3 estates, that is the clergy, the officials who work for the church are coming under the umbrella of clergy, the nobles, the feudal lords, they enjoyed the feudal privileges who are closely associated with the monarch, come under the bracket of nobility, and the rest merchants, court officials, lawyers, peasants, artisans, small peasants, landless laborer, all were brought under the third estate. One of the other significant feature which we need to remember is the first two estates, that is the clergy and the nobility, are exempted from any kind of taxes. This is given as a birth privilege to them as they are born in the higher estates of the society. So, from this it is very clear that the third estate itself gets all the taxes burden and they only have to pay everything, while these people enjoy the privileges on the name of the privileges given by the estates and also enjoy with the money paid by the third estate people. Now, other than this, 60% of the entire cultivatable land is under the control of nobles and the clergy people, while they also enjoyed the feudal privileges. As I mentioned earlier, the nobility has the privileges of feudalship where the landless laborers have to work for the noble lords. Then only they will be respected in the society, and they are forced to work for very less wages or sometimes no wages. And the churches used to collect taxes other than the taxes which are collected by the government, that is the tithe and tiling. Tithe is 1/10 of your produce comprising of agricultural produce, and the thili is a direct tax collected by the church. Now, the society is divided into three estates, which shows the clear bifurcation of the society, and which categorization itself reveals for us that certain special privileges are given for the first and second estate. Those are clergy and the nobility, and the third estate people are merchants, court officials, lawyers. These all are must to pay the taxes, and it is mandatory for them. They have to pay all the taxes, not only to the government but also to the court officials, and they also have certain special privileges which force the other workers or the landless laborers to work for them freely, and they also have to pay the taxes like tithe, which is 1/10 of your produce, and thili, which is a direct tax collected by the church. So, this is a broad picture of the society of the France at that point of time in the later part of the 18th century. Now, let us see the struggle to survive. What is a struggle to survive? In the French society, we have the population in 1715 is 23 million people, while in 1789 it rose up to 28 million people, which means we can see an increase of 5 million population in a span of 1715 to 1789. So, it is nearly 64 years the population increased 5 million years. With this, automatically the need or the necessity of the food grains also increased. As the population increased, the percentage of the people those who consume them also increased, ultimately resulted in the increase of the food grains. Later, this impact was shown on the cost of the bread being risen. So now food grains cost increased, resulting in the cost of the bread going up. In this time, are the wages not increasing? Yes, wages also increased for the people, those who are working, but this wages could not increase in par with the necessity or par with the requirement. So, the gap between the rich and the poor got widened. As the gap between the rich and the poor got widened, in order to add to this situation further, whenever there is any drought or a hail, that also brought severe trouble for the people, especially the poor people, to face many problems, because this reduced the production. The droughts or the hail destroyed the production which is actually in shortage when required to the population requirement, and still when this added for that, this resulted in the subsistence crisis. What is subsistence crisis? The subsistence crisis is a situation where the basic needs of the people are endangered, especially food, clothing and shelter are in trouble. Those kind of situations are named as subsistence crisis. So now in France in 1715 the population is 23 million. It rose up to 28 million in 1789, and this raises the requirement of the food grains and also resulting in the cost of the bread going up. With this, the wages are also increased, but not in par with the requirement or the times allotment of the situation, because when the price of the bread is increasing so much, the wages were not increasing so much. And then droughts and hails also added to make the situations worst, because they destroy the production, they reduce the production capability of the field, and this ultimately resulted in the subsistence crisis. Subsistence crisis means a situation where the basic needs of the people are endangered, and this endangered situation is known as subsistence crisis. Now let us look at the growing middle class. The growing middle class came up with a point that the special privileges which are given to estate 1 and the estate 2, that is the clergy and the nobles, have to be waived off. What made the third estate to come up with this point? Let's find out the details. The revolts in the initial years, where the third estate people were burdened with all types of taxes. So whenever there is an increase in the taxation, or whenever there is food scarcity, the third estate people always tried to raise up their voices to make the rulers to understand that they are facing so many problems, but they could not succeed in their attempts. So that point has been left out for the prosperous third estate people who came or who emerged in the later part of the 18th century. Actually, the third estate comprises of merchants, administrative officials like lawyers, clerks, and all the other court officials, all come under the category of the third estate people. The merchants started to do trade not only within the country, but they also started to do overseas trade. With this overseas trade, they started to earn huge and huge profits. And as officials of the courts and all the other administrative position people fall under the category of third estate, where all the educated people are present. So the educated people started to question why there is a special privilege given to the people on the basis of their birth. There is no book which claims that they should have special privileges basing on their birth. So why are the special privileges given to these particular people? So these questions started to be raised up on a very higher note. And later we also look at the books written by John Locke and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. John Locke, in his book Two Treatises of Government, clearly mentions that there are no special privileges given to any of them basing on their birth, and also Jean-Jacques Rousseau similarly mentions that there is a general agreement between the people, but not any power and the people. So the power rests with the people and not with the king or the monarchy. So people are the original power holders, not the power sufferers. So he also raises the point, and later in USA we can see the theory which was put into practice or force, theory of separation of powers ideology given by Montesquieu in the spirit of laws of his book. So now The France people also want a clarity on what are the rights that a king holds. Are they judicial rights? Are they administrative rights? Are they political rights? They also need a clear separation on the holding of the powers, and why are not people involved, and why there are special privileges given to the people on the basis of the birth. These all were the important topics which are deliberately discussed at the saloon shops, coffee shops, and various other places. As most of the people are uneducated people, the people, those who know to read and write, started to read the books aloud, so that the neighboring uneducated people also can understand what is a theme or what is a book about and how to understand the policies. So all these made France aware, and this is a situation where the people started to discuss that it's not basis on the birth that special privileges have to be given. It is basis on the talent, and the prosperous people of the third estate started to question what is the difference between the noble clergy and the third estate people. Why there is a differentiation, and why only the third estate people are forced to pay taxes and not the clergy and the nobles. Larger part of the land is still today under the control of the clergy and the nobles. So how can the country progress? And why are these special privileges given on the basis of the birth? These are the important discussions everywhere in the corner of France and at the center of the capital. So now the understanding of the people started to increase. Now the people are suffering with many economic problems. During this time, Louis XVI came up with an idea to increase taxes in order to maintain the royal court, in order to run the government, in order to maintain the special privileges and the extravagant court, which triggered the anger of the people, where they started to consider that this king is the main reason for us to have these many problems, who is not actually looking at the solution of the problems, but increasing our problems. Now, the outbreak of the revolt, as we discussed in the introduction of the lesson, the people have did some terrific action. What was that action sequence we discussed in detail. Now, let us see step by step. We saw how is the society during that period and what is subsistence crisis. Subsistence crisis has always been in France. Now, the situation was, from the king's point of view, there is no other alternative left out other than doing taxation. So we need to increase the taxes. That's the only way in order to maintain the credit balance, or in order to have the treasury full in France. So the kings cannot increase the taxes as per their will and wish. They have to assemble the estates general, and then they have to take voting which approves the taxation, and then it becomes a formal taxation procedure completes. Then they go ahead and pay the taxes. So now the estates general was asked to gather, which gathered in 1614 for the last time, and after nearly 175 years, it was called on 5th of May 1789 to pass the proposals of taxation. So as the estate general rules dictates that every estate will have representatives gathering, and then they discuss on this issue, they go for voting, and then they finalize the proposal of taxation. So the three estates are being invited. The resplendid hall at the town of Versailles became a venue for these people. It welcomed all the delegates, 300 delegates from estate 1, 300 delegates from estate 2 are sitting right opposite to each other, while the third estate people are having 600 representatives who are standing at the back of the first estate as well as the second estate. Only the well-educated, elite group people of the third estate are allowed inside. The small peasants, the workers, the women, the children are denied entry into the hall at that time. So they all wrote their problems, their request in the form of letters, and these 600 representatives are catching those letters, which accounted nearly for 40,000 letters in their hands. So all the three estates got gathered, and king came up with the proposal of increasing the taxation. But as people started to read the books which are having social awareness, and according to the book written by Jean-Jacques Rousseau in his book Social Contract, he mentions rightly that the general will of the people has to be taken into consideration by giving equal value for all of them. But as per the traditions of estate general, every estate, it may be the first estate, second estate, or the third estate, will have the right to vote for only one vote per estate. So now the third estate people want to have more number of votes in order to get their voting approved in the estate general hall. But the king decided to go up with the old practice. As the king decided to go up with the old practice, the third estate people are very unhappy and dissatisfied with the king's decision, and they started to move out of the town hall. They moved away from the estate general's meeting on that day. So this happened in the estate general hall. King ordered for the meeting after nearly 175 years. On the 5th of May 1789, all gathered. Each estate has sent their representatives, like first estate 300 people, second estate 300 people, sitting right opposite to each other, and behind these people we have the third estate people. The third estate people are a total of 600 representatives who are having 40,000 letters given by the people those who are denied entry into the hall, giving their requisitions and their problems in the form of letters. When the king appealed to go with the old tradition of single estate, single vote custom, the third representatives or third estate representatives started to raise up the slogans as per the social contract book written by Rousseau, that everyone has to be given equal right to vote so that their voting can be approved bilaterally. But the king, who decided to go ahead with the old practice, did not agree and decided that we will give only one estate, one vote. So this made the people of the third estate to feel very much annoyed, sad and depressed, and with angry with the decision of the king, they left the hall and moved outside. Now, the outbreak of the revolt, we discussed that all have been ordered to gather in the estates general. So the three estates have sent their representatives. The king decided to go with the old tradition. We are giving each estate one vote. Now, as there is no choice left out, in order to protest the decision of the king, the third estate people moved out of the assembly hall, and they gathered on 20th of June 1789 in the indoor tennis court, as they assumed that they are the true representatives of the France nation, and they decided that they will draft a constitution which will definitely limit the powers of the king, especially the monarch, and constitution will be the supreme, and people will have the authority to decide what is right and what is wrong. So in this intention, the people, those who drove the third estate people on this large gathering, were two people, Mirabeau and Abicius. Mirabeau is basically belonging to a noble family, but still he has the idea and the views that this special privileges has to be waived off from our families, and he gave many speeches inspiring people about the thoughts and his ideology. And we also have Abbassius. Abbassius is basically a priest, and he wrote many pamphlets encouraging the people to know what is the third estate. The real true face of France is the third estate. The third estate comprises of 90% of the entire population of the France. So these motivated words of Mirabeau and Abbassius made the people to gather on 20th of June 1789, and they decided that they would not come out of the tennis court until they finish drafting of the constitution, which will definitely restrict the authorities of the king. And later, when the people or third estate representatives are very busy in drafting the constitution, the villages and the people were struck with the severe bad weather conditions, and the severe situations made the people on 14th of July to come and blast the Bastille Palace. After the Bastille Palace has been blasted and it was broken into small fragments, and these fragments were sold in the market, the rumors were also spread that in the villages the lord of the manor is the representative of the king, who collects the taxes from the village people, and he lives at a place called Chetiox, the official residence of a manor, where we have the hoarded grains and also the documents where every villager has to pay the amount, the details, everything will be kept there. So they heard a message or a rumor that the lord of Manor has taken help from the king and brought brigands who are coming to destroy the crop which is on rice and then torture the people. So the angered people took the hoes and the sickles, and then pitchforks, went in a mass gathering to destroy the Chetiox, and they completely destroyed the Chetiox, grabbed the hoarded grains and burnt the manorial documents completely. And after destroying them, they forced the manors to leave away their homes, and they occupied that manors, which resulted that many of the manors left the country. Many of them took shelter in various other neighboring countries. So the moment when the situations are going on, they became from severe to worst, and then now the entire France was angry with the ideology of the king. The idea of putting taxes on the third estate, which is actually a burden to them, even the king knew the point, because the first and the second estate people do not pay any tax because they are exempted from the taxation, while the third estate people, who are really facing lot of problems because of severe bad weather, because of poverty, there is a lot of situation where the people could not even buy a piece of bread. Instead of helping the poor people, the king is planning to increase the taxes on the third estate people. This concept, these special privileges raised the anger of the third estate people, resulting in blasting the Bastille Palace and also clearing the Chatillon palaces or the official residence of the manors, and made it completely clear that the anger of the people has been shown in action to the king. So finally the constitution was drafted, and king, after looking at the reactions of the people becoming so violent, and was not left out with any other option other than accepting the constitution, agreed that constitution is supreme than him on 4th of August 1789. So with this, France becomes a constitutional set up. So what did they decide? Did really king accept or any other conspiracies behind this? Let's find out.
If you like this video, please give a thumbs up. Please subscribe to our channel to get more videos on CBSE syllabus.